I have just a little introduction, and I'll
Sure.
before we start. So I'm going to read it, guys. So, hey, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Debbie Barrett Jones. Thank you all for joining us today via Zoom for Jason Pollen's Artist Talk, hosted by Leedy-Voulkos Art Center. On a personal level, as a textile artist, Jason Pollen means so much to me since he was one of my instructors at the Kansas City Art Institute in the fiber department and has been a mentor of mine since graduating. We at Leedy-Voulkos Art Center have had the honor to exhibit in our main gallery Jason Pollen's beautiful artwork since December. His retrospective Witness will be up until Saturday, March 6th. If you have not been able to see it in person, we welcome you. For more information, please visit our website at Leedy-Voulkos Art Center. I am recording this artist talk and it will be available to watch soon on our website later today. If you've not had the chance to watch Jason's walkthrough video that he talked about, I highly suggest that after this artist talk, please take time on our website to visit and watch the video. And we also have an exhibition catalog that you can take a look at. I will introduce Jason, and then Jason will talk about his work in his exhibition. And throughout the talk, there will be a time to ask questions. We will end the talk around 2 o'clock. If you would like to ask a question and put it in the chat box, we will make sure to try to keep up with them. And just a friendly reminder, if you could all mute yourselves, we would appreciate it. Jason Pollen is an internationally acclaimed artist, designer, and educator. He has been an iconic Kansas City visual artist since he joined our art community in 1983 as a professor in the fiber department at the Kansas City Art Institute. Since his retirement in 2010, he continues to be prolific by maintaining a dedicated and spirited studio practice. He draws from his personal love of nature, travels, and life experiences. He then takes those notes and experiments with surface treatments, materials, and sculptural techniques. This combination of ingenuity and self-reflection results in distinct iconography and visual keynotes that are unique to each of his featured series: Descendants, Witnesses, Stands, Outliers, Nomads, Portals, Ventanas, and Ancestors. He shifts his focus from one series to another and back again. There are common visual and conceptual threads that unite his entire retrospective entitled Witness. It is an honor to showcase such a vast and varied collection of Pollen's artwork. Please welcome Jason Pollen.
Oh, thank you. That sounded like a gold star. If I had it, I definitely put it on. Well, thank you. Thank you, Debbie. And again, it's a delight to have Debbie be the person doing this, because she was a student, a remarkable student who is a remarkable artist herself, a weaver, an art weaver, and a functional weaver, and as good as it gets. So if you don't know her work, check her out online as well. The word witness, which is the title of the show, came fairly late after I knew I was going to have this exhibition. And it just seemed to the word stands in for the experience I've had since I was a child, really, building sandcastles and just watching things come to life out of, very basic materials sometimes. And that has never really changed. I'm not a conceptual artist, so I work very much inspired by, sorry about that. I was afraid that might happen, the harp on my phone. Sorry, I lost the thread there. Thread being an interesting word to use here, because my background actually had nothing to do with thread at all. Through graduate school, I was a painter, having studied sort of the more fundamental academic approaches to drawing and painting, and only through life in Paris as a starving young man, artist, I discovered that I could do textile design, and um, that learning textile design and making a living doing it helped me survive as an artist as well. But because I did textile design, I saw textiles, and they became eventually the medium that was paramount in the work for a good number of years. Sort of a blending of painting, collage, using textiles, and now, of course, other materials as well. Like many artists and many professionals in all fields, it seems that just being dedicated and determined to be there every day and make things usually leads to a certain degree of, let's call it mastery, I guess. And if one is lucky, some revelations along the way that propel us to want to dig deeper and do even more.
Oh, we need milk.
Oh, look who's here, Beverly Ahern. So Beverly, hi.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. So Beverly Ahern, there she is. She also graduated from the fiber department, and then also became one of the, shall we call it, directors of the H&R Block art gallery here in Kansas City. So if any of you have seen the show and have questions about the types of work in it, we could talk about that. I will say that the last group of pieces, which are behind me, are these witnesses of the word. We talked about it, and these came about. I don't do a lot of figurative work at all, but in my sketchbook, I sketch 2 hours every day, and I've always done that. There was a figure, and because we've all gone through such a difficult time this last year, it seemed to me that this figure was standing kind of as an alert presence, waiting out what we're all enduring in a way, sort of waiting in a kind of noble way. I don't always feel I'm able to do that, but they're able to do it. So I first made them as flat pieces, and then eventually had the idea to have them come off the wall and through a magnet, create some distance, shadow, and groupings. And I also feel really happy about the fact that these could be very inexpensive, because as you know, for artists to make a living, a lot of the major works are quite pricey, and people with deep pockets are the ones who can afford those things. But I've always felt awful that, not awful, but felt disappointed that people who might like the work couldn't acquire at least something. So these witnesses have been remarkably popular. They're all individual. They are, the skins on them come from either textile designs or textiles I've designed and have been printed, or my own pages from my sketchbooks. And so that's why there are so many of them and so many different looks to them. And so those are the witnesses. And so now I'm going to open it up to folks, please, to ask anything about this person you've decided to tune into here, and see if I can be useful in a conversation rather than a monologue.
Jason, I'd like to ask you about how you planned.
Well, please, Tony, introduce yourself.
Sorry, Tony Jones. I'd like
Tony is the president of the Kansas City Art Institute.
Have you met my agent? Jason, I wanted to ask you about how you planned for the exhibition, because when I saw the gallery empty, I thought it was a tremendously intimidating space. I mean, it's an enormous space, and it's wide open, but it also seems to sort of break down. And you use the word groupings. So could you tell us when you thought about the space, how you thought about what you'd put into the space and how you made the groupings.
Well, yeah, there's probably a complex answer to the question. I brought down twice as much as what you see now in the gallery, because it was not at all clear to me which pieces would best suit that environment. And so from that huge number, I culled out what seemed not to make sense. And then really, I'm not an exhibition designer at all. I don't have the eye for that. And I happen to, the gallerists and friends of mine together with myself said, what about if these go here and that goes there? And we did a lot of shuffling. And remarkably, I had an entire month to install this show. That has never happened before. Usually, if you're lucky, you have a week. But we actually used the entire month to be able to come up with a final distribution of work in that space. Yeah.
Would you change anything?
I don't think so, no. It seems to, I feel like it sort of hums the way it is. Yeah. There might be one or two, there are, of course, a couple of pieces that I wish could have made it, let's say, into the show. But at this point, I decided, we worked hard enough to get it as it is, and we'll just leave it that way. If there was a rotation possible, I'd probably rotate pieces, but yeah, that's not going to happen. So, Tony, you're looking good.
You too.
Thank you. So, anyone else? Come on, folks. You have questions.
Hi, it's Beverly.
Beverly, good.
Jason, I remember when I'd come to visit and you were working, you would always be listening to music. How important is music to your work, to your visual work?
Well, that's interesting. In some ways, there are moments that if I could, I would create music that would embody what I hear in Bach fugues, in Johann Sebastian Bach's music. That has not actually happened, but it's certainly something that inspires me. Music inspires me. But mostly this year, I've worked in silence with much less background sound of any kind, and the inspiration for the work has not come from that source. Some of it has come from travels, but most of it just comes from being there and watching what plays out on the table and in my, with the materials that I'm using. But coming from a background of classical musicians, it is my greatest love, and there has been, there will have been at least 3 concerts that will all be recorded that are taking place in that space. One has occurred already, a 16-minute recorded musical event in and around the pieces in my show. And then there are 2 more concerts planned, one with a group called The Wires, a duo, one of a cellist and a violinist, and then Park University is having its orchestra and a piano moved into the space later this month, and they will also do a recorded event. All of this will be there'll be quite a lot of public relations activity surrounding these concerts. But to watch, I have to say, being in the space and hearing the music was an extraordinary delight and gift to me. Yeah, and if I could, I'd have dancers in the space, and I'd be one of them. But these days, that's not appropriate at the moment. Yeah.
Uncle Jason.
Yeah. Oh, Ian. Yeah. So my nephew Ian, who's at Cranbrook. Hey, you need a haircut, Ian.
I do. So good to see you and hear you.
Too. Yeah.
I was wondering if you could talk about the transition from being a formally trained, classically trained painter into the fiber world that is so much your work now, and if there like any sort of tipping point or where that desire, curiosity came from.
Well, thanks, Ian. It came from seeing fabric printed, silk mainly, silk, let's say a Chanel silk blouse with my design on it in luminous dyes, and realizing that, well, I was so moved by this little gouache sketch that I had created turning into this pliable, beautiful, lustrous cloth that the main question was, how did they do that? How does that work? And out of asking, how does that work, I began to learn about dyes, how dyes are printed, where I could get information about all of that. And I was very fortunate to learn some of those processes in Paris, but also more so in Morocco, where I studied indigo dyeing, and then in India, where I lived for 2.5 years. And of course, both of those cultures have an extraordinary textile history, and a lot of my questions were answered in those places. And that's where the great love for painting on cloth or printing on cloth, collaging cloth came about. It also became very practical to be able to take work to galleries that was folded up as opposed to stretched onto canvas stretchers, which in Paris was very hard to do in the metro, and I couldn't afford a taxi. So, so that was it happened slowly, but incrementally. And still to this day, there is this sort of blending of the background in painterly techniques and then in textile processes. Yeah.
Well, so my question sort of relates to that too.
Oh, look, it's Scott Anthony. Wow. Speaking of a musician, Scott teaches piano at UMKC.
Yeah, so when I look at your show and I see the wide diversity of techniques and materials, I'm really curious in your creative process how tactile qualities or materials come into play. So when you're creating something, does that drive your creativity sometimes, or do you already have an idea of what you're wanting to create and then you choose the material and the technique, or what is that interplay?
Scott, I wish I could answer the question in a very logical way, but actually, how can I explain this? Of course, we all have a lot of materials around us, and since I normally have mostly worked with fabric, canvas, silk, other materials, I also, after when I retired from the Art Institute, I made a group of pieces called Sentinels, and those are there's some in the show, and they're standing wooden pieces, and I never really worked with wood, but I decided I had to be brave and do something I didn't know anything about. And also the freshness of working with something that you don't know brings back the kid in us again, like, what if I tried this? What happens if I use a wood tool? What happens if I etch it? What happens if I saw it into and put it back together again? So these things just come about over time without, or maybe I see something in another show, another person's exhibition, and wonder whether I could incorporate that approach or those materials into my own work. There are many things that I don't work in. I haven't worked much in metal at all. Stone, I did study stone carving. I went to the University of Puerto Rico in my junior year and studied stone carving, and I knew I never wanted to do that again. I had an aunt, by the way, who was a remarkable stone carver in Cambridge in Massachusetts. Anyway, so it's just, I mostly use the same materials, and then occasionally we'll add on things. And recently, because of Paulina, my assistant, and her profession, or one of them being both an artist and a designer, she works in plexiglass. And I thought, well, I love the idea of transparency, of the reflective quality, of the quality of color. You can dye plexiglass. And although it seemed like a cool material compared to what I'm used to, I certainly was willing to dive in and work with it. But without her, without having her around, I wouldn't have even thought to do that. Yeah. Scott, I've lost your voice. Are you back?
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, so did the imagery come after she had exposed you to that plexiglass and then you decided how you would manipulate it, or?
Well, if people have seen the show, they'll see that there are a number of the pieces, the series called Descendants, which are really just simple 7-inch long horizontal bars. And then I just decided to resist. So I put some resists on them and spray color onto them and then link them and have them turn in space. So the shape is a very simple, basic shape, but the combination of having several together and allowing shadow and transparency and reflection to come into it seemed to be satisfying to me, is satisfying. So that's how those pieces came about. Anybody else here?
Something that
Sorry.
I was gonna.
Oh, Pauline.
Oh, hi, Pauline.
So Pauline is the chair of the fiber department. I was the chair of the fiber department before her and had the grand opportunity to have her convince her to come and replace me. And she's a way better chair than I ever was. Anyway, I'm so glad to see you.
Glad to see you, Jason, and you look great. What a gift to be looking back 50 years. Not many of us will be able to do that, half a century. That's amazing. So I want to go back to your retirement from the Art Institute, because I spoke at your retirement, and I remember, saying that I knew you would be prolific because you never stopped doodling. Your hands were always moving in meetings, everything. You would
Yes,
never
especially at faculty meetings. Yes.
Exactly. So of course you have been way more prolific than I think anybody, ever imagined you could be. But I'm wondering, how has your work changed? You were prolific before you retired. How has your work changed since retirement? Do you feel liberated to be able to do whatever you want? Did you feel more constrained maybe when you were in academia, or not?
Well, the good news, as you know, and for me, because when I moved here, I didn't know how to drive. So of course I live across the street. So there was very little time lost between teaching or going to teach and coming back to my studio. It's right across the street. And because we don't teach 5 days a week, we do have the great luxury of having more time than many people in the world. And so, and then being a solitary hermit type anyway, whenever I would just come home and start working again, because it seems to be the most natural thing for me to do when not teaching. But I never found teaching was an imposition in any way. I relished those years teaching and learned a great deal from the students. And of course, having all the time now, there's nothing that prevents me from working 24 hours a day if I want to. And so so that's why so much more has gotten done. I also think that because of the illness that I overcame in 2008, 9, 10, I think, and because of the age factor, I thought, okay, you never know how long we have on this ride on this planet. And so, come on, just get to it. Don't just do what you can do in this time. And it's what you love to do, what I love to do anyway. So there was never any hesitation to do it. And as one can see from the show, lots of different things showed up in terms of ways of working. And I always feel like I'm still learning, because the school has a fab lab and we can now do digital printing and etching, and if one 3D printing, which I haven't done yet. I also flirted in a way with those processes, and the school gave me that opportunity. So I'm very grateful for having a few more ways of working than I did before.
Jason,
yeah.
Talk a little bit about that period of block and how you slog through it, and how you get creativity afterwards.
Well, I wish I could show people how that worked. I'm very fortunate that only once in my life I had a serious artist's block. I was doing a type of work that was very saleable and kind of elegant and all of that. But I felt at some point I was repeating myself, and even though people said keep doing it, you can have all these shows, I said no, I can't. I refuse to keep doing something. And this is a wonderful story. When I lived in France, I was in the south of France, and I was at a museum looking at two Chagall. You all know who Marc Chagall is. I was looking at two Marc Chagall paintings side by side, and this old guy says to me, "Which one do you think is a better painter or is a better painting?" And of course, with my art speak coming out of graduate school, I said whatever I said, and then he looked at me, shook his head, and I realized it was Marc Chagall. And so he said to me, "Don't do it." And I said, "What do you mean don't do it?" He said, "When I came out of Russia, I had a visual vocabulary that was very fresh. It was totally natural for me to do this work." He said, "These are copies that I made of Marc Chagall, and everybody wants them, and my wife makes me do it." That's really what he said in French. "My wife makes me do it." And he was recreating a vocabulary and a way of working which no longer felt authentic to him. So the point of telling you that is, I had that experience and that memory of what he said when I thought, I cannot make work like this anymore. And for 30 days, I just cut out linguini-sized strips of colored silk and laid them down next to each other, a foot of them every day for 30 days, not knowing what it is I would make after that. But I just still did that, and that was kind of all I knew to do for that time. And then on the 31st day, suddenly I knew exactly what I wanted to make, and it was nothing like what I had done before, and I was off and running again. And then ever since then, that has not happened, actually. But I feel like maybe one of my gifts as a teacher, I hope this is true, was that I could see where people felt blocked and went blocked, and maybe had some sense of how to help them through that moment and on to the next level of making things. Yes, I'll say, so maybe you can all see this. This I later cut up those strips into these descendant pieces, but on here you can see, at least horizontally, these are some of those linguini-sized strips that I had cut up and made this scroll of the 30-foot long scroll, and then eventually cut it up into something else more manageable. Anyway, so that's the block story, and I think it's very interesting how we all deal with this block. We have blocks in many aspects of being human beings on this planet. So yeah, thanks for asking, Jay.
A little follow-up on that, Jason.
Yeah.
When you're doodling, all of a sudden something comes. How does that happen?
Well, I have no idea. I absolutely have no idea. I mean, before I got on here today, I was drawing in my sketchbook again, and I doodled something I thought was pretty interesting, and I might cut it up and use it as skins for some of the witnesses. but I don't know where this is a complete mystery to me. I have no idea where visual clues come from. I think for many people in many fields, when you're familiar with a way of working and you just get to it, I actually feel like I disappear. I'm not even, I'm not planning anything, but I'm open to whatever wants to show up. And it just becomes, that's just how it works. You know, with music, because you and I both love music, I often wonder this about musicians. How in the world did Brahms come up with that symphony? I mean, and Brahms, by the way, is someone who also said that he took no credit for what he created, that he was simply channeling what he heard. So isn't that astonishing? Yeah. So how grateful to be about that. All right, somebody else. See some people smiling. That means you can relate to the. Or so come on, Emily. Somebody. What are you thinking?
Jason.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hi, it's Susie.
Oh, Susie. Hi, Susie.
I saw in your list of credits that or history that you did some design work for the ballet, and I was wondering, since that's a different space, how you envisioned that and what the ballet was.
Yes. So this will bring me to my great, great gratitude to Kansas City. You know, when I moved here, people thought I went stark raving mad in both New York and Paris. They still think that. However, the opportunities that have come to me here are absolutely amazing. My first profession was as a ballet dancer. I started at 8 years old in New York and was dancing for a very long time, and still teach tango, although not at the moment. Anyway, so I knew the director of the ballet company, William Whitener, who now lives in New York, or actually is in Florida. And he was creating a new ballet called Haven. That was the first one, and asked me if I would design sets for it. Well, I'd never made anything bigger than, you know, a bread box or a refrigerator or something. However, the Zahner Corporation here in Kansas City was willing to work with me at no cost to create sets for the ballet, and also Golden Star, where I had created these mats for floor mats and placemats for Golden Star Corporation here, Kansas City, and those people allowed me to make larger versions of what I do. And then that's how those first sets came about. And then I revisited being a set designer again later on for a ballet of Carmen, and also took great pleasure in being able to do something, as I say, that opportunity never would have come about anywhere else. I can't imagine it. So, but it hasn't made me want to work on a monumental scale. Definitely not.
Hi, Jason. It's William Lawson.
Hi, William Lawson.
1986.
Yeah.
And I had a question about the dance, because I remember seeing you dance often in the studio while you were whirling about as you were. I'm wondering how much dance is inspired, or your work is inspired by the dance that you have such great experience.
Well, I wish I could say that it does. I mean, I think being a sort of a musically inclined person, the idea of course, in making work, rhythms and gestural movement to create those gestures come from maybe a body awareness, let's say. There's a piece in the show, the title of which I can't remember, and I definitely recall the dance-like moves that allowed that piece to come about. But maybe in the future I'll do more dance, have more dance-like things happening into the work itself. There's a kind of choreography in putting things together, of course.
And did you have a favorite dancer of the time?
Did I have a favorite?
When you were young, painting.
I'm so, wait, say that again?
When you were younger as a
Oh.
painter training, I mean, were there, and you were dancing, were there people that you had an association with that you admired most in terms of
Well, there were, I mean, so many great ballet dancers that were in New York City at that time, and in Paris at the Paris Opera Ballet. I mean, absolutely astonishing. And, you know, one just was awestruck by the genius of greatness. And I mean, I could name names, but a lot of people wouldn't know some of those names. Yeah, anyway, I still actually on YouTube every evening now, I watch older performances of ballet dancers that I remember from my youth that have been captured and are recorded. There are many out there. It's pretty amazing.
I was commenting on the choreography of your work. The choreography of the work behind you is very reminiscent of the Ancestors series. If I took my glasses off, I'm seeing twigs.
Yeah, well, yes. So those twig pieces were made in Paris, or they started there when I had no more money, and that was all I could afford. Things that didn't cost anything. Many years now, all this 50 years later, the format of having things in rows, but having a different kind of presence than a twig, is definitely an echo of that arrangement onto a larger surface. Yeah, that wouldn't have happened maybe without those earlier pieces. Yeah.
So Jason, I have another question.
Yes, Miss Pauline.
You know, I look at all of the little boxes with people's faces and the names, and I recognize names, and I'm kind of thinking about community and, you know, support system and the way we are gathering now. You know, I see, for example, Leslie, who's in California. If this was a talk at Leedy-Voulkos, she wouldn't be here.
Yeah.
So even though I regret that we can't all be together, it is amazing though that now there's a group of people gathering who you have assembled in that sense, with the help of Debbie. So I want to know what is important for you as you continue to do your work. When you were teaching, of course, you had, you know, colleagues and a certain support system from, you know, your daily life, you know, at school. And you said, as you're still close to school, you know, it you know, remains an important connection. But, you know, where do you see your community lies? What is really important to you right now to keep making what you're making?
What is truly remarkable, I suppose, and I wouldn't have expected it, is that Instagram has become actually a most lovable and wonderful venue for me. I have been, you know, before the show opened, 100 days before this show opened, I decided, I think with Paulina here, or maybe I just thought about it, that we would do a countdown, that I'd post a piece every single day for 100 days. Well, because of that, you know how long I taught there, and also at Parsons in New York and in other places. And now I'm getting to hear from people. I mean, it's almost like dying and going to heaven. Suddenly these angels are showing up again in my life. And also some of them seem, the ones that didn't like me don't show up, but the ones, I guess, that felt some positivity are here. And I'm really inspired. And this is, in a sense, now at the moment, my community. And in making things and posting them, I want to do the best things I can do so that they can enjoy. So I don't know, it's very inspiring. It makes me want to even try to make even stronger work, I guess I would say. Yeah. So this is it for now, isn't it? For all of us. I mean, here we are. And remarkably, at a time of isolation, we can still be together because technology just happens to coincide with this difficult moment. And Yeah, yeah. So yes, yes, please.
Hi, Jason. It's Eleanor. I'm a
Hi,
very long.
Eleanor. I remember. Yes, hi.
Hi, it's great to see you. I watched your Instagram, and so I was really excited to see this event happening, to touch base again. But I have a beautiful memory of you, and I was there. I graduated in '81, just to give a little perspective, and I was in printmaking. So you would often walk by printmaking on your way to the fiber offices, and you were reading. You had a book open, and you were walking, and I think you were going home. You were heading home, and it was this beautiful, almost a trance or a walking meditation. That's I was reading into it, maybe perhaps as a young student, but I always remember that, and that made me feel that there was a real spiritual kind of connection that you tap into somewhere within the making of the work. And maybe I was just curious, with all your travels and everything, if you care to talk about that.
Well, yes, I thank you. I think I will. So like many people in the 60s, I was a very disgruntled American man because of Vietnam. So being half French, I moved to Paris, and also at some point was disgruntled with the whole notion of whether the question was, is there something more than the Western way of looking at the world and looking at life? And out of that question, I decided, okay, I'm leaving, I'm going east. And like the Beatles, I went to India and actually got a house and lived in Madras. I thought I would live there the rest of my life. After 2.5 years, illness made me return to Europe. But in the time there, I met some of the most remarkable human beings I have ever encountered on this planet. And one of them is the Dalai Lama. And the Dalai Lama and I share a birthday. And I won't go into the story now, but through my experience with Tibetans, I became a director of Friends of Tibet and also very close to the Lama. And still as a very young man, this was a very different way of looking at the nature of being, and how to be. Well, and his philosophy really boils down to just kindness. And I'd never met anybody kinder than that man. And so that was the beginning of setting something in motion, I think, that connected me to peoples that are very foreign in a way, and yet with whom I felt a great kinship. And so I started to meditate 50, 45, whatever it is, years ago, and have been doing that every day ever since. And I have to say, I think I've benefited enormously from kind of dealing with the static we all have in our minds, the tapes that repeat in our minds that are often not very helpful. They're habitual behaviors. And I think maybe because through that, it also allows me, when I start making work, to enter into this sort of fresh pool where there's little to worry about and nothing to predict. It's all very transient, and yet there's Tibetans do sand mandalas. You all maybe know what those are. They spend a great deal of time doing this, and at the end they scoop it all up and put the sand back in the rivers and dedicate it to the aquatic life. And this idea also of impermanence, all of those kind of thoughts about the nature of being on this planet for a short period, really a lot of approaches to that came about from living in the East, I think. So, yeah, yeah. 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 Jay, there you are. Anybody else have a thought you want to share? Or maybe a parallel existence that you're having? We could also sit here in silence, which is one of my favorite things to do.
Jason, is this show going to travel?
No, it's not. I mean, it would be wonderful, but first of all, it's a huge show, and I'm not a very good self-promoter. But if anybody knows anybody who might think to recommend it to others, I would be open to that, of course. But it'd be very hard for something this massive to move on. What is regrettable, of course, is how few people have been able to see it because of the pandemic compared to normal times. And it will end just as maybe things are getting better out in our world. So, yeah. We can also stop earlier. We don't have to go, a whole hour here.
Well, I'd like to for you to talk about your descendants that are hanging on from the ceiling. There's 13 of them. So when you're talking about dance, I think about those pieces. Can you talk at all like how those came about?
I will. Yeah, that's the sweetest story. So I'm a Tai Chi practitioner. Actually, yesterday a group of the Tai Chi people were down at the gallery, and I did a little talk for them. But there is a Tai Chi camp that we go to most summers in August, and I was outside the studio where we do the practice, and one of the other members there saw me standing in front of an aspen tree, and she said, "Your energy is like that tree." And I looked behind me, and aspen trees, they twitch like that, and they're also two-sided, and the way they're attached allows this extraordinary movement. And I didn't know what she meant by my energy was like that, was like it. But when I got home, I thought, well, what if I made work that came off the wall and could turn, could move? And that's how things in life can sometimes become sources of inspiration. So I started with very little leaf-like shapes that were, that came off the wall and could move. And little by little, I started making them bigger in different compositions. And eventually, the longer, bigger. Here was maybe the very first version of that, a leaf-like shape, which is out of silk and stitching and dye and so on. And I did 1,000 of them. I tend to get kind of a little excessive with my numbers. Anyway, that led then to these longer, bigger pieces that move in space. And yes, I think they probably are the most dance-like. Or when I was 8 years old in New York City, my mother was a dancer. By the way, she studied with Isadora Duncan's company. That's a whole other thing. But we used to go to the whole family would go to performances. And one day we went to see Turkish whirling dervishes. And if any of you do not know anything about whirling dervishes, after this, immediately go online and look up whirling dervishes. So whirling dervishes turn in space counterclockwise. It's the way we do in tango too. And they really get into a remarkable state of mind so that they can turn in their own axes for hours. And I never seen anything like it before, but in a way, these descendants sort of also reminded me of that inspiration of watching people just move in space the way the dervishes do. That comes out of the Sufi branch of, it goes way back to the 7th century of Islam, the more esoteric side of Islam. Yes, good question. Things that turn in the night.
I have a question, Jason. This is William.
Yeah.
I was curious about, I think it's the Prophet series. It's very almost iconish, religious iconography, if I remember. Beautiful, beautiful work. I'm just wondering where that inspiration came from.
Well, yeah, they didn't make it into the show, unfortunately, but they're not in there. Well, that's very important too. So as a child, we went to the Metropolitan Museum, and when I saw these Egyptian mummy cases, first of all, the bodies are wrapped beautifully in these linen wrappings, but the faces are painted boards, very realistic boards, portraits of the the people who are buried inside those sarcophagi, right? And I remember as a child being so, again, astonished by seeing those faces of those people who were dead. And I think these prophets, out again from my sketchbook, but came from the I don't know, the feeling of wanting to just recreate a group of beings that I just showed up like that, and having again a background in academia. Of course, we had to do portraits and figure studies and all the rest of it. So it seemed pretty natural to revisit the face. Yeah, yeah.
They seem so individual.
Yeah, well, again, they just show up. I don't know where they came from.
Yeah. Thank you.
I have about 100 up in boxes in my attic. If you want to see some in person, just give me a call. Well,
we have someone has one more question, and then I was going to ask you, Jason, to talk about those events that I think you're having a couple events, and where to
can you look at the dates?
Yeah.
Yes.
So someone has one more question, or we'll just go straight to. Okay. Jason, you mentioned some of the events that are coming up, the musical events. We want to talk just real quick about those again, and then where we will be able to see those after they are done.
Yes, I will. So on the 24th of this month, the Wires, which is that duo, the string duo, they will be recording and performing their work. And I don't know exactly how soon after the recording of it and the filming of it, they'll put it out there, but they're really good at PR. So they will do that. And then on the 27th, Lisa Hickok, who is the director, musical director, I think is her title, at the Park University, she will be having the orchestra perform that night. I'll do an interview with her at 5 p.m. and then the concert is at 7:20. And there will be some invited VIPs, I think, people from Park University that will be present. And again, after that, that will all be available out here in this world, our computer world. So stay tuned for that, and we'll make sure everybody gets the information. Gets the announcements when those things take place.
We'll also be posting the ensemble with the Mid-Science group on Instagram TV, which is, I think, a 16-minute long performance. So we will be posting that on Jason's Instagram and Facebook, so everyone can watch the performance.
Yeah. Well, thank you all so much for showing up here and taking part of your day to do this. I so appreciate it. It really is a remarkable and a joyful thing for me to have you care about me. That's
thank you, Jason.
Thank you very much, Tony, and all of you. Yeah. Okay, then.
Thank you so
much. See you all.
Yeah, and so if anyone, again, Jason's show will be up until Saturday, March 6th. That's the first Saturday of March. We are open 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. So just go and visit our website for all that information. And thank you so much, Jason, for taking time.
You're welcome. And if any of you, either personally or any groups, would like to come down to the gallery any day at any time, I have the key. We can do that together. So it doesn't just have to be when the gallery is officially open. I would love to see you there. Okay, guys.
Bye. Thank you. Bye, Jason.
Bye. Thank you. Bye.